Hey everyone, we got Joe Wilson with us today. Joe is a serial entrepreneur and investor, and he's done all sorts of really cool things personally and professionally. Joe, I really enjoyed our prep call and getting to know you a little bit, so
Yeah.
definitely looking forward to today.
Well, good morning, James. Yeah, look, everybody can see this big, beautiful rainbow logo behind me in case you missed it. So, in addition to the aforementioned wonderful stuff, I guess I'm also the chief evangelist at Bunq, and we'll talk a little bit about Bunq as we go along. But look, it's honor, pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, so let's do it. To start us off, where are you from?
Yeah, that's a great question. Let's put it this way. I'm an American. You can tell by my accent, although sometimes people can't tell. I'm from the deep South in the US, actually. Like I was born in Alabama and raised in Mississippi and Tennessee. And that's from, if you want the short story, it was a family of modest means and you had to kind of work your way through everything. So I think the work ethic starts all the way back then. But that's the core places. Like I'm from the South in the US.
Alabama. So, how long did you live there? Was it like your entire childhood or?
Yeah, man. Yeah, so all the
Yeah.
way through to like I went to university in Memphis, Tennessee, home of the blues and all that. Made my way west to Colorado. That's where I met and married my wife and did our first few startups. So I did five of my own companies. So the first two were out of Tennessee. The last three were out of Colorado.
That's awesome. Nice. What were you like as a kid?
Yeah, what was I like? Let's ask my mom. I think she'd be the best answer, and she does it through stories. I was incredibly restless. I was one of those kids that drove parents crazy, and I'm sure I was on a spectrum of any sort you can imagine, in that like I had more energy, and I like to say brain power, but that's more self-effacing. It's maybe a reality. So like my mom tells lots of stories of like my mom was a manager of a donut shop, right? So she was running a donut shop and she would be there kind of doing her review with her boss and find me climbing in the shelves where all they store all the flour and stuff like that. So that's me as a kid. I think it's a summary of me as a kid is like more energy than common sense.
So did that mean you were like the most popular kid in school since your mom worked at managing a donut shop?
Yeah, man, one would think, right? But no, it wasn't like that. I was kind of a music nerd. I had a small set of friends and just I was really into both music to listen, but also I was learning to play and different instruments, stuff like that.
Nice. Nice. So what instruments did you play?
So I played guitar and I played the trumpet, and which led me towards the blues cornet, which would take us into the nuances of playing the horn section, but we probably don't have time for that.
Yeah. Okay, gotcha. That's great. So were you in a band or anything like that or?
So there was always bands at school, but yeah, we had a couple things on the side. We believed ourselves to be brilliant. Let's just say that.
Yeah, well, great. Yeah.
Yeah. I was kind of born with an extra set of batteries and a little more confidence than common sense, so those things have served me well.
Nice. Nice. And so when you were in school growing up, what did you like studying the most? It sounds like music was a big
Yeah,
one for
well, I
you.
mean, so I had this fascination with literature. I think I was,
Mm.
I don't know if I was an escapist in stories took you somewhere. Like you hear these stuff, if you go back to read anybody who likes to write, they always talk about their love of literature. But I always loved stories. So I found myself, weirdly enough, like paying attention to grammar because it was kind of unlocking your ability to understand stories and phrasings and things like that. So I found English as a topic really fascinating. But then, frankly, mathematics as well. So I had this weird right brain, left brain thing where I was in love with anything that was fiction and then anything that had an absolute resolute answer. So both of those things were my favorite. That actually continued up to university. Like I ended double majored in creative writing and calculus. So
That's awesome.
yeah, well, weird also. So.
Yeah, well, weird can be awesome.
Well, yeah, that's true. I think for me, I love characters. I love people that are just kind of who they are in their own skin, and I think that's this. I've tried to sort of live that too.
Yeah, I love that, man.
Yeah.
It's so when you were growing up, did you always know you wanted to be an entrepreneur?
Um, no, I think entrepreneur. Maybe I'm a reluctant entrepreneur in a way. Like it was born out of necessity rather than this great beautiful dream. So like again, I mentioned we were sort of modest means. So I was like the first kid out of my family, in my side of the family, to be able to go to university, meaning qualified and could go. Because the family could never assume they could do it. I mean, nobody could pay for it. So then it was up to me. I had to pay for it myself. So I had to find a way if I wanted to do that. Most of our guys are like, go to the factory, work in the factory 10 years, and you'll have a good life or something, right? And I was like, no, I got to do something different. So I was kind of like one of the breakout kids in the family that way. I say that as if we had a lot of kids in our family. We don't. It was just me and my sister. But yeah, so to do it, I had to find a way. So I started my first company when I was in high school, doing home repairs and improvements so that I could pay for college, so that I could afford to go. I had to find a way to make a revenue, make money, so I could pay for it, and that's kind of how it all started, out of necessity.
That's great. And so did you end up trying to grow that business, or was that one more of
Yeah,
contracting or
yeah. I think if you talk about people have their stories, right, and then you have to be
Mhm.
careful that your stories don't become the ones you tell yourself versus the ones that existed in the reality. But I'd
Sure.
say this one tends to stay in the reality, which is probably the most important company that I've ever run. I've run a
Mhm.
few now, and I think this was one that fundamentally, and I hope anybody that listens to this, anybody who's thinking about being an entrepreneur, like you're gonna have this moment where, can I do this? Is it possible? And sitting in a dorm room with a cell phone, like booking jobs to do home repairs and improvements, became this thing that told me, hey, maybe this is possible. Maybe I'm not like going to work in a factory and I'm not limited to just whatever this degree is going to give me, but I could kind of do anything. And it
Mhm.
was the ceiling breaker, right? That was the thing that broke. Like I say this because I had this visualization where I felt like there was a stopping point and suddenly there wasn't. So this company is the most important because it cracked open my brain and it said, hey man, just keep going. Like you don't know what's possible unless you just get out there and try it. I ran this for the entire time I was in university. I sold it for about 300K, which sounds like an amazing success story, except at the time, my business acumen was modest as well. So I probably owed 290,000, and then of the 10K profit, like 5K paid for me and a bunch of friends to go to Florida. So it was one of those stories where the most important part of it was where your brain ends up and what your possibilities are.
Well, it sounds like it was yeah, it's opened these doors of possibilities. It's like also this confidence builder where you're like, well, wait a second, maybe I can do this, right?
I
Test
mean, everybody
previous
has to have their
yeah.
moment, right? You had to have your moment. You had to
Hmm.
go through this at some point where you're like, oh, maybe I'll do this thing rather than that traditional path. And you don't know if you can do it. And you realize maybe taking a chance is okay. And then at some point, if it starts to work out, you're like, oh, ooh, maybe,
Yeah.
okay. And then
Yeah.
if I could do that, oh, well, maybe the next, well, so you just keep being able to dream up, right?
Yeah, exactly. I think for me it was getting out of high school, moving out on my own is really where I started to, I guess, start to believe more in my potential, believe it or not, at a boxing gym.
Nice.
So
No, did you do Muay Thai, right? I thought I
yeah,
saw that in your background. So
yeah.
yeah,
It's literally how I made a living for many years.
yeah,
And it was also doing like personal training, so teaching people. And I was really hustling. I was at one point literally living in the gym.
yeah, of
And
course.
it was pretty cool. At
I
the
mean,
time,
I say that because it makes
yeah.
common sense to me. Like you probably had a couch in that gym and life was 24/7 and you were going to make that thing work. And that's
There
good.
was like a little office off to the side, and I would it's ridiculous in hindsight. I would take the cushions off the couch when the gym was
Yeah.
closed at night and put them in
Yeah.
the little office and create like a makeshift
Yeah.
bed.
Oh man, my wife would tell you stories about when we first got married and we were running our companies. We started a company and we have like you can't get anything on credit because you don't have it, and so you have to assign your bank account to payroll, right? And she calls me up and she's like, "We have no money." I'm like, what do you mean? Well, we didn't make sales that month and the rollover happened and it wiped out everything we had personally. So we're living off credit cards for like 4 months in order to get it all back on top because that's what entrepreneurs have to do. You're sleeping on the office in the storage room. I mean, on the floor of the storage room
Well,
because that's what.
the storage room was taken by one of the other coaches. So he turned that it was hilarious. And like I don't know how the owner of I mean he was a cool guy, the owner. Um but my buddy, who was like my first coach actually, this was the guy that signed my parental signature so I could start fighting at
Yeah,
17.
yeah, yeah,
Um but he took over the storage closet. So like, it was
yeah.
funny though, because he would walk in and out of there and close the door behind him like during gym hours when people were there. So they'd be like, why is this guy, why does he keep going back there and shutting the door? It's like
He's
his
like
little like apartment.
this strange, weird guy that lives in the storage room, and you're like, just don't pay attention, man. Focus on your fighting.
Yeah, man. Yeah.
I
It's
mean, we all have these stories, right? We
yeah.
all have these
Mhm.
origin stories where somewhere, somehow, somebody rolled the dice. And I think that's how this company was called Fix It. That's how Fix It was
Mhm.
for me. And it led to many other things, but it was instrumentally, I think. And when I talk about like to this day, I still think if I hadn't done that, I never would have done anything
Yeah.
like this. Yeah.
So you were like in the earlier days, so you and your wife started a company together?
This was later. The first
Oh,
company
okay.
was Fix It was on my own. That was during university. And then later she would be involved in a way, not necessarily. We did a company later together, but we were married while some of the other startups were going on. That's how I referenced the no money thing because I had to put my money on it in order to do it. So that's how that comes
Yeah,
together.
of
Probably a
course.
little less interesting, but
You got to do it. Well, no, I'm curious though, like, so just kind of talking about the psychology at that point, right? Where
yeah.
I mean, look at where you are today and like everything that you've accomplished. And there's those formative experiences too, where particularly in the early days, where sometimes you have to fully leverage yourself, take big risks, and you have to be able to manage that one way or another. And sometimes it's not as pretty as we hope it will be. It's really challenging and hard. I'm curious, like, what was I want to get into like
Yeah.
reflecting what it means to you, but at the time, what was your state of mind? What did you think about what you were going through and how'd you get through it?
So I'd say there's two kind of interesting stories or so that would illustrate this. In the earliest days, where you're kind of in survival mode, like you think, I guess I don't know if I had the like we have a world right now where everybody has this in their head like a bunch of tech guys get together and they come up with an idea and they go get a bunch of money out of Silicon Valley and that becomes something and they're billionaires at some point and that's this kind of dream. But the majority, 90%, 99% of all actual startups, they land somewhere at the bottom or somewhere in the middle, right? They don't all land in the super story. I had two out of the five that landed on the upper side, but not at the super. Now, I'm not a multi-billionaire from that, but multi-millionaire exits and people got paid back and people made money. Those are crazy great success stories. But the mindset at the time is that you're like, this is what I do. This is, I invent things, I create things, I find a way to make things happen. My energy and ability was in formulating an idea, taking it down to its granular level of like, what could we do with it? And then stacking little tiny pebbles on top of it until it became kind of a small rock that you could go throw at something. So that was sort of my mindset was whatever I'm going to work on, whatever I'm going to do, had to have a worth in the world. And I'm not trying to say heartstrings save the world, but like it had to have a reason to exist. It had to be useful. And so normally I'm like trying to solve a problem, something that irritates me. Right. So there's this thing. One of the companies I was involved with did 3D on the web. Right. And the idea then was like we had this wonderful, incredible visual 2D world, but why couldn't we do 3D? The technology was there. Long story short, we were ahead of our time, but like it was an irritation. So my mindset was often in frustration, irritation, and the fact that something should exist that doesn't, or a problem should be fixed that's not getting fixed. All right, I'm gonna do it. That's kind of the way the mindset. Long story short, long story to get around to like that's the mindset. It's like I gotta fix this. I gotta make it, I have to will it to live.
So it's when you're going through those really challenging times, it sounds like that really the standout is like you're kind of immediately going into problem solving mode, right? You're just
Yeah, I think
becoming
it's a
obsessive and
yeah, I think
finding that
a
solution.
it's like a warm coat, right? You can fall back on fixing something. When the world falls down around you in the entrepreneur space, you can go down to this problem you set out to solve and feel pretty good that you're still doing okay.
Yeah, no, for real. And I like asking people, it's like when you're going through those times where you're stretching yourself, like
Yeah,
and it can be overwhelming. It's like, how do you navigate that? I was actually speaking with the VP of talent acquisition over at Zapier, and the very first thing is just diving into the solution, just
yeah,
attaching to taking steps, and also just accepting the uncertainty, right? But focusing on, despite uncertainty, coming up with a plan and just
yeah.
tackling it, taking action, like strong bias for action. I think to me, I suppose that that makes sense because it's when you're in those chapters, if you're idle and your brain isn't actively focused on the solution, your brain wanders and it almost gets harder to
Well, you end
navigate
up
those
if
times.
if you're not in that kind of solution zone. I mean, we're talking abstract in a sense. Like
Right.
if you're not in like the solution zone, you're probably in the way to the problem zone, right? So you're trying to go to the other piece. And I would say, like, I do agree with one thing you said, which is the action component. I forget who said this, and it was a quote that kind of landed with me a long time ago, which was action carries with it its own authority. So the movement, the thing, the doing of something actually will carry an authority with it to like try and get things done. And I always found that super useful. Like I'm inaction feels like idiocy. And so I always wanted to like, something had to happen. So doing
Yeah.
something was always better than doing nothing. But if we come out of the abstract, because I think sometimes you have to be careful. Like people will look back on their careers and they'll have these lovely nostalgic views of how cool it was when we couldn't eat or something, right? But most of that's not cool. Most of it's like pain and difficulty and you're frustrated.
Yeah.
But when it works out or it solves it through, you're like, you're happy about it. And I think of 5 different companies I started and ran, 3 of them failed miserably. I could probably look back now and figure out whether to get in or not get out. 2 of them had exits, which would sort of set us up for everything else we wanted to do. And the problem is, as an entrepreneur, when you have a success, you're like, look what I can do with this money. I can start another company. I think it's just important to keep that reality-based view. I know a lot of people go on talk shows and they do these things and they always have these lovely memories. My memories were wonderful and they made me who I am, but I'm not going to pretend they weren't
Yeah. At the
hard.
time, like, yeah.
And I'm not going to pretend that they weren't real. And I'm not going to pretend that I didn't screw up 80% of what I was trying to do. And I got lucky sometimes, but I also maybe had a 10% smart streak where I could get through it.
So when you're like in a position now where you're clearly in your prime, you've had a lot of success. When you're like mentoring people that are more so starting out, starting their own company, or
Yeah.
really trying to accomplish any kind of big dreams or something that's really hard, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
What advice do you share?
I think the starting point is always like, what are you trying to solve? This is the old, what's the problem? What's the problem you're trying to solve? Does anybody care? Like there's kind of research problems out there where we're trying to advance a field of study. And those are, I think, admirable and noble and things that need to be done. And they should and will sit in academia for a long time. And then there's just problems in the world that need to be solved. And I don't necessarily mean, again, world hunger as much as like high speed, the next level speed internet or something, right? Something very tactical. And I just want to make sure that everybody they understand the problem that they're trying to solve and they have a general understanding of who needs it. Those are the most important questions for anybody, for me. And I know it's so basic, right? But the basic is what is it? What's it do? Who wants it? How would you convince them to try it? And will they actually pay for it? Get through those like on a solid ground foundation of facts, and you can probably build almost anything off of those. And then it all becomes operations, right? We can talk about that at some point because I have a deep view on the role of operations in a company. But my advice is always to get into those questions in a super hard way. The biggest problem I run into is most first time entrepreneurs, we lie to ourselves a lot. Like we are self-selling. Like we convince ourselves how great something is. We won't see, how ugly the baby is, if you know what I mean. We won't look at it and be like, oh yeah, well, I know it's my baby, but probably not going to be a model. We won't do that. And the what I find is that my technical friends, my people who grow up as engineers, and they tend to be far more honest about this stuff than the business development entrepreneurs. So they tend to go look at those things in an honest way. And I think that's a skill you better have from day one is to just be frankly, brutally honest about something.
So to develop these insights, right? I'd be curious to dive into a couple some breakthrough moments in your career. Like you've been around for a little bit and some
Yeah.
just perspective altering experiences that
Okay.
stand out to you.
There's a couple like we're together in a company called Anarch back in the early 2000s, and we're doing this 3D thing. And so it's me and a few other people, and they're super smart. And we're going at this thing where we are convinced, right, that the world needs 3D. Like we have the technology we can run, and for anybody who's technical, 3D graphics are fundamentally at a mathematical level far more complicated than vector-based graphics. For all my graphic nerds that are tuning in right now, like this is, it's really interesting how much different it is. So we were able to build like a plugin on a web browser that's only a couple megabytes that would give you the quality that you might see in the movies, just to give you a sense. And it's interactive, like fully interactive. It's super cool, like gaming, but you could do it on the web and you could do it for advertising and everything else. And what happens weirdly enough, is that we're going after this thing. We're raised money. I think we're up to like 65 million that we've raised, which is really big back then. And the market somewhere along the way just sort of goes, I don't need this. Like, I don't, I 2D will be okay for a long time. And you don't realize it, right? You think, oh, your plan is still good, but you're not listening. And you realize at some point you come to the realization that the market has decided it doesn't need you and you're still doing the same thing. And when you do that, you sort of like someone has stolen all your dreams, right? And you have to have this super hard conversation. That company ultimately pivoted into the CAD CAM space. So if you understand where I'm going, that's 3D. But the way you go from glamorous ad based web advertising agencies, every design agency in the world, over to let me build you a washing machine or a building 3D, is that you go back to the fundamental question of who's going to pay for this. So when the world came down to the question who's going to pay for 3D, it was in a different place than when we were selling. And that was hard. And it was probably one of the most difficult pivot conversations I've ever seen, but it had to be done or you would be dead. And if you rewind that same company, there was a whole platform decision where we had to lay off half the company and things like that. So those are like big moments where you learn to be honest with yourself. So that's an example. Like, I don't know if that's a breakthrough, like, oh, wow, look how successful it is, but it's a moment where you become fundamentally smarter because of something that you're experiencing. So that's an example, maybe as one.
Yeah, it's like questioning potential biases or questioning your line of thinking. And it's like one of the, I don't know, just little quotes that's always stuck with me. And I can't even remember exactly where I heard it, but in order to prove yourself right, try to prove yourself wrong.
Yeah,
Just
yeah.
question your line of thinking and try to poke holes in
Prove
it. And
yourself wrong first, right?
right.
And then
Hmm.
at least you would know the problem to solve. Yeah, I agree with that. I think that same company, I will say, had a lot of lessons. Another one that, and I'll keep this in the abstract and keep the names out of it, but like
Yeah.
I remember being in charge of all the revenue and everything that's going on, and we're failing because of the situation I just described. And we're going into a board meeting, and we have a chairman who's extremely experienced, and we're getting ready for this board meeting, and he sort of sees me, and I'm probably wound tight, man. I'm wound. I'm a very different leader manager today than I was then, and I'm wound tight, and I'm like getting ready to go do battle with the board, right? This is, you can see probably physically, this is where I'm coming from. And he's like, he decides to delay the board meeting by an hour and he takes me for a walk, right? We're in Boulder, Colorado, and he takes me for a walk and we're walking around the city. It's a kind of a mountain town. And he's like, what's going on with you? And I start to explain why this is, and he's like, look, man, look. This is software. This is IT. This is technology. This is online. He's like, you're not saving babies in the emergency room. Like, get this shit in perspective. If you're calm and you are balanced, you can perform at an extremely elite level. But if you're like this, you're basically playing the junior game the rest of your life. Do you understand what I'm telling you? And I was like, what? And I think somewhere over the course of 6 months after that conversation, it finally locked into me what he was saying and how to like kind of clock that information into performance and considering how to make decisions and how to go at things. And I think it was one of the greatest lessons that I ever got in the heat of a moment where somebody took the time to sort of say, look, you might be good, you might even be great, but not like this.
Okay, so let's just I'd like to slow down on this for a minute because frankly, sometimes this is something that I struggle with, right? Where it's like I attach myself so much to the outcome that I want to achieve that it becomes like
Yeah.
sometimes it's almost like life or death feeling, right?
Yeah,
Where
you're measuring everything by this outcome, right? In a way, and it's like you're
yeah.
attached. You said it right.
Well, so like how do you I do have this, and maybe this is something you have some feedback on, but I think I have this completely obsessive mindset when it comes to growing my company
Yeah,
and making it a category leading.
yeah, yeah.
And so it's like how do you balance that level of obsession with is it almost like letting go or I
No,
mean how do you How do you
I mean,
actually
look,
implement this as an entrepreneur? Because I
like
I
it is.
struggle with this.
We are who we are, right?
Hmm.
Like we kind of and whatever it is about us that got us to this point is what it is. You feed that energy because it got you this far, right? Nothing's wrong about that. I also have always talked about ego as this wonderful double-edged sword, right? Probably the majority of jobs that I've ever gotten or things that I've ever done, I was relatively unqualified for, but I talked myself and other people into it to let me do it. So, in a sense, I was overselling, but because I oversold and I was a fast learner, I actually got these step-up opportunities. So, these are all good things. The lesson inside of what this guy was telling me was there are very, very few one and done moments in your life. You normally have multiple points that you're building towards something, and there's not these like magic movie moments, right? So if you can basically take yourself out of the one final shot of the ball game mentality and think in the systemic building mentality, then you will balance your effort and energy and accomplishment across that structure, and you'll probably make calmer, smarter, better decisions than you will if everything is wound up into this moment that you put in your head. And so he's basically telling me at the time, to put a fine point on it, like, you think we're going into a board meeting and your job is on the line. That's what you think. So you're in ready to defend yourself. But the truth is, we want you to do this because you're probably one of the only people that can, but we need you to do it better. Let's talk about this problem and solving it rather than being on the defense mode, and you can probably get more done. So he's kind of twisting it, so that I understand that I need to balance and play, relax and play my game rather than be wrapped in a single moment as if it's life or death. Because then I will be a performer rather than this kind of warrior that I turned into.
It's like this overemphasis on these
One
like
single moment.
individual, right? And it's
Yeah.
really it's like a million moments, right, over a period of.
Yeah, not very few things that you do. And again, anybody who's an entrepreneur knows this. Very few things that you do will have any single moment. You might have a moment where you remember, oh, that's where it turned, but it won't be like a thing you landed and, like it would be a thing where you kind of did 75 things 60% right, and they kind of collected on top of each other. Then finally something began to go your way and you could start to build some momentum and you were smart enough to keep it going. It's usually like that more than it is we did everything, we built it out, we landed, and boom, it took off. It's rarely like that.
So that was that a challenging transition for you to change your philosophy toward
Yeah.
moments and pressure and.
Yeah, it's to say the least. It was super challenging for me. So intellectually, I was kind of born, raised, grew myself into this like performance mentality of crossing a finish line or throwing the touchdown in an American analogy or something like that, right? We're gonna have this giant celebration moment and we're gonna be heroes. It's this kind of hero thing that we stories that we tell ourselves. And I had to shift it to like the builder mentality, which is I'm going to build something in a direction. And the belief in that system and the belief in that effort, and, well, the belief in that delivery will yield the greatest results more so than the amazing one time super duper thing that I was going to pull off. So when you move out of the hero mentality and into the builder mentality, you start to make, I think, balanced, smart decisions that take you somewhere. I'm gonna give you an example. Um, at Bunq, and I'm not trying to take it into Bunq, but like at Bunq, there is a very distinct cultural component of solving the long-term problem rather than the short-term issue. So when if I were to like do a proposal and somebody was going to review it and it was really about just fixing something that's happening right now, culturally, the company would kind of go, come on, man, right? Like that's going to come up again, right? Three times, five. Why don't we solve it for good rather than to solve it for now? And that was one of the things I think you got to make that shift. And it wasn't easy for me because I don't think I'm wired that way naturally. I had to adapt.
I wonder too if it maybe the why that's a challenging shift, at least like I'll speak for myself as an entrepreneur. It's because when you're starting back and you go back to those stories of like when you're living off credit cards,
No.
right? And you're in the early days, there's like whiplash sometimes, right? With growth and churn or whatever it might be while you're establishing a product market fit or a consistent customer base or whatever it might be. It feels very much so in your face like survival mode. I got to figure out
I
how
mean,
I'm going to keep the lights
failure's
on.
real, right? Failure will be
Yeah.
real. It could be failure is financially crushing, so it's not like it's not real.
So is it like, do you feel like there's also maybe this like stage appropriate mindset where it's like, those early day, well, maybe not because it's like you always want to be long-term focused to take some of the pressure off, but
Yeah, I mean, this is we are having right now is the classically good discussion about the false narrative of being an entrepreneur and the actual narrative of being an entrepreneur, right? Because the false narrative is it was hard times, it was difficult, we slept on the couch, but this cool thing happened and they found us and they gave us money and boom, it worked out and look at what we've done now. That's the false narrative because it happens 0.0001% of the time and it's great when it does for somebody. The true narrative is like we grind it out, right? We grind it out like actors who waited 10 years to find the good gig. We grind it out and we keep going because we believe in it. And in this case, failure is costly. It will ruin you financially in the US. But somehow you still roll the dice. And if you can in those moments take a little bit of the air out of the balloon and find that center point, I think you just make better decisions.
yeah. Yeah. An episode you might actually enjoy is we recently did an episode with Reese, and Reese is on the founding talent team at a hyper growth startup called Dust. And previous to being in talent acquisition, he was actually a professional soccer player.
Oh yeah.
And he talks a lot about like pressure and how to kind of psychologically go through the ups and downs and stay in the middle,
Yeah, yeah.
essentially.
That's
Um,
exactly what I'm trying to say. Maybe Reese says it better because it's like how do you take that path through the center of the sorrow and the chaos to get where you want to get, right?
yeah, it's like saying mentally leveled, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, that's cool. That's something that I'm gonna think a lot more about too, just like going into 2026. I mean, like just trying to be the best version of myself too, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, exactly. And I think these breakthrough moments are things that come slow and they come quieter than most people think. And I know that's not what everybody wants to hear, but for me, that's just the reality. Like we've had in the different companies, I think a single account was never really the answer because
yeah,
you can lose it just as fast as you can get it, like if you're doing an enterprise side. But whatever we did to get that one, we kept trying, and we were able to get four, five, six more, and suddenly diversify. That was a better answer than the one big win. Or on the consumer sales side, the change, right? Try and change. Like run 100 versions until something clicks. And the funny thing is that one word in your, whatever you're doing with Google to game Google might have made a difference. And then you just run that thing until it starts to drop off, and then you innovate on top of it again. Those are the grinders that make massive success. We succeed better through those lenses. And I don't have a business I can point to that I was in where that wasn't the case. I was, luck is great, but I'd rather have process.
yeah. So we've talked a lot about how your experiences as an entrepreneur has shaped your philosophy toward building companies.
Oh,
What we haven't talked about yet is the amount that you've traveled the world and the fact that you've lived in several countries and your dad, right? And
I am a
you've
dad.
traveled with your kids too, I think, in several different countries, if I remember correctly.
Yeah.
And of course, that has a huge impact on our values and our perspective in business as well. So, just to take a step back, you've lived in all sorts of cool places. So where have you lived?
So anybody listening, here's the short story. Grew up in the south of the US, found my way west, ended up being addicted to international culture because in my junior year of college, a friend of mine was living in the UK and I went and backpacked Europe. Like it took me a year and a half to save. And actually we ran out of money in the first couple of months and we just played guitars and sang like Elvis songs and people gave us money. Don't ask.
That's
It
awesome, man.
was, and so
That's for another podcast. We could spend like a whole
yeah,
hour
because
on
we
that.
just basically busked our way across Europe. But it opened my eyes to a lot of things. I'd never seen my own country from outside, so I saw a different version than what I'd sort of grown up with, and I'd never seen all these other places in real life. So I became sort of like, wow, again, if there's this much, how far can I go? So to answer your question, yeah, we have four kids and we've lived in on three different continents across six different countries, maybe seven if you want to count some of the 5, 6 month extended periods of living different places. And that stretches all the way from being in the Netherlands a few times, in the US, We lived in India, we lived in UK, Paris, Portugal. I'm sure there's something I'm missing because my kids grew up internationally and they probably feel more like citizens of the world than they do necessarily one particular country. But it was a gift we were giving ourselves, right? And the answer was not, I always get the question like, so you got a job and they moved you. I'm like, not really. I mean, Jules and I, my wife, we decided, look, I want to know what that's like. So we said, we're going to move to India. I was actually at Microsoft when this happened.
Hmm.
And we just told Microsoft, like, hey, we're going to move to India. They were like, what? And we're like, yeah, this is an experience we want to have. And they're like, but they worked it out. Like they worked it out that I could keep doing what I was doing and I just got to do it from there. And it turned out that was easier to do than I thought it would be. That they would pick companies would stick with me, or I could, if it was my company, I just kind of moved the headquarters for a couple of years. So it was more about the desire for the experience. We have a motto between Jules and I, which is like experiences over possessions. Experience over possessions. Our mathematical equation is I want to, at the end of my life, have far more experiences on the numerator than I have possessions in the denominator, right? And that's going to be the way that life is rich. So that's why we decided to do all that. And we still are. Like, as we speak right now, I'm only 40 days away from moving back to Amsterdam.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
I gotta ask you about India though, before we talk more about Amsterdam.
Yeah.
Where
Yeah.
where did you live in India?
Bangalore. We lived in
Bangalore.
Bangalore. Yeah. Which is a very cool place. I mean, all of India, if you get to know it from the south, if you understand Hinduism. The story with India for us was my wife said 2 weeks after we moved there, this is the biggest mistake we ever made in our life. And then 2 weeks before we left, she'd be like, this is the most magical place on earth. And it came down to when you begin to look at a place, you come from one place and you go into a new place, you start to judge it based on where you came from. When you exist in a place, if you're smart, you start to look at it based on its own rules and constructs and situations. So you begin to see India from inside out rather than outside in. And then you begin to fall in love. I mean, socially, they're far more advanced than we in the West are, meaning, to make a point out of it, we're living in a middle class neighborhood called Ulsur in Bangalore. And I'm off doing work and stuff like that. And then my wife's managing everything at home during the day. I come home and she's like, we got to go to the grocery store. I'm like, great. So we just start heading out of the apartment. And I'm like, wait, we got 4 kids. Like, what are we doing? And she turns back and looks up at the apartment and sees somebody on the balcony. And she's like, Pratibha. And Pratibha's like, got it. Give me some mangoes. And basically the answer was like, there's a social construct where they take care of each other. And so we're picking up mangoes. She's like checking our kids. We do the same for her. And it just, you have to understand this. And any Indian person who's listening to this will probably recognize this because they know with all the frustration and how tight it is and how close people live and the quality of life and everything else, there's a whole nother world that's happening there that you don't understand until you exist within it, not as a tourist.
How long were you there?
Oh man, off and on 2 years.
2 years? Yeah.
Yeah.
How old were your kids?
So when we first got there, our youngest was 3 and our oldest was 15.
15.
And the 15-year-old had probably the most interesting experience of all because he was old enough to kind of see the world from it was and also to wander through lots of different things that, on his own.
It must have been a really unique and special formative experience for him being at that age too. How do you think that that's impacted him and benefited him throughout his life?
Yeah, let's see if he's listening. Grayson, if you're listening. I think Grayson got to see a side of India. If you're in India and you're working in the tech industry, something like that, it's quite likely that you would have a driver. Now, it sounds quite luxurious, but the cost of that is very low. And our driver had a daughter who was quite ill. And so he would come to me. His name was Vasant, and he would say, hey, look, Mr. Joe, I've got to take my daughter to the hospital. And I'd be like, take the car. And he's like, I can't. If I take the car, I will get fired from my job. And we're like, take this kid in your car to help your kid get to the hospital. So Grayson became the ride along every time that his daughter had to go to the hospital so that he wouldn't get in trouble with his company. You see what I mean? How we're working
Mhm.
that system. And so Grayson's experiences were quite unique to ours in that he's riding along with this family, this everyday Indian family, and going with them to the hospital and the local dining and everything else. So it becomes kind of a piece of their daily life. I mean, his daughter was ill, so like once every couple of weeks she was at the hospital for something.
Yeah.
So I think it was formative for him. I think he learned a lot about obviously culture and things, but he also learned a lot about how lucky he was in a way.
Yeah, it's totally different culture, totally different perspective, worldview, in a lot of ways, I'm sure.
Yeah.
I think that that's so important for people. It's not always possible, right? But to the extent it is possible for people to travel and experience different cultures and even live in other countries, it's
Look,
an
I think
incredible
it's
experience.
possible for everyone. I think this is my kind of, people will say that's a luxury view, Joe, you can afford it. But I started traveling long before I could afford it. Like,
Back to the guitars and Elvis
yeah, I
songs
mean,
and
it was like, it was just, it's always about a decision to do it and find a way than it is about waiting until you can afford something. I don't know how, I mean, we might be a long way from hiring an entrepreneur at this point in the conversation, but
Mhm.
maybe we're not. And that most of the good things were based on a commitment and a decision to do it more so than they were whether it could be afforded or was going to work out. Like you had to just kind of go, just
Go
do
for
it.
it.
Don't
Yeah.
wait. Yeah,
So you're moving back to Amsterdam.
I
How
am.
long did you live there before?
Total of probably 11 years. So we
Oh,
had two
wow.
different,
Okay.
we
So
had, we
that's
had
like a second home
five.
for you.
Yeah, we had like 5 years one time, 7 years another time. And so in
Is
this
that for
time,
work or just like again a decision? You're just like, no, I just want to be here, so I'm going to be here.
yeah, the answer is always yes, both. I mean,
Yeah.
we didn't go there because someone was sending us. We went there because we wanted to go, and then we
Yeah.
found a way to work it out. And then eventually, like on the last part, we had our own company. So when I talk about having a company with my wife, we had our own investment. So the big story is like startups, Microsoft, my own company, and then board roles, and then COO at Bunq, and then some other things. So this is a time when we are running our own. We took our own money as investors, made a fund, and started doing sustainability investments into startup companies in Europe. That's what we're doing up until 2018 for 5 years.
So you were so
Sorry, up
you
until 2023 for 5 years. From 2018 to 2023, we were basically running our investment fund.
got it ending in 2018. So your scope of what you did at Microsoft was large. What exactly was your role in 2017, 2018 for
Yeah, well,
Microsoft?
so roles, I started there, I think in 2004, something it's like 10 years, right, in Microsoft. So, and I came out of starting and running five companies. So I was a weird fit. Like I
Yeah.
came into the company at a time when you still had Bill Gates, you still had Steve Ballmer and all that stuff. It's pre-Satya Nadella. And it was the same stock price for many years, like nothing had changed. And they were starting to look at the fact that what they had hired, their classic Yale, MIT hirings, weren't actually yielding anything different. So they started to look at different types of hires. And I was one of those hires, which was English major turned entrepreneur, semi-technical, can run organizations as a different profile. So I was hired to run everything that the company was doing for students at the time. So that was for me an intellectual challenge. I love those types of like, okay, it's kind of a brand that at the time people didn't love, and students especially were all Mac. So this is a challenge. So that's how I got into the company. I did that for 5 or 6 years. We did some pretty remarkable things. I always like to say that I felt like we were the L on the P&L for the most time because we were mostly investing in share and growth and the strategic stuff. I moved from there into developer relations. So we're doing platform, like we're growing people's adoption of the platform. So think the OEMs, the guys that build PCs, into the integrators, into the developers, which is, I love developers. They are the most cantankerous audience in the world, but they're brutally honest. So you always know where you stand. And that would then take me from doing that in Europe and then to come back and run that worldwide. So you're talking probably it's a multi-billion dollar business, 1,500 employees. And then I would go back to Europe to be in the kind of the COO of Eastern Europe, Central and Eastern Europe, which was probably at the time probably a $3.5 billion business. It was larger, but we split commercial and consumer. Scope wise, I had groups of 20 and up to 1,500 across 130 countries and revenue lines of nothing all the way up to multiple billions. And Microsoft, that's, a company like that or Google or Amazon, those are the types of companies you can do those things. And it changes how you think. It's weird because I went entrepreneur, big company entrepreneur, and the big company benefit was I know what scale is really. And when you cannot consider anything less than 1 billion in revenue or hundreds of millions of customers, I know what that's like to build a plan for and deliver and see the numbers go.
And then you started investing, right? So this was investing in
Yeah.
startups
Yep.
or
Yep. Started investing in Series A levels for companies in Europe that were focused on sustainability. So in other words, we have kind of an OCD problem in our house. We can't stand plastic and everything else, and we're trying to do something about it. And we had a good hard talk, and it's like you can talk about it and you can recycle, but in the end, my money is going to have far more impact than my everyday recycling. So we decided to invest in companies that could scale. So we started looking for that and handpicking. And the model was pretty simple. Like, I'll give you my money, but you got to take my time too, because I want to be involved. So for each of these companies I invest in, I would spend up to 3 hours, 2 or 3 hours a week. And I can't stand the investors who come in as reviewers. They're just going to review your business all the time. So my job was to own a problem in the company. So I'm going to give you money, and when I'm going to take on a problem, that's the model. So I could only do so many of those. So probably up to, I think we had it 12 or 13 at one time, and it's probably down to about nine
Mhm.
now. One had an exit moderate. One I think is going to have a great exit, and then a few others are, we'll see.
Right.
Yeah, it takes like 7 years to find out if you were smart or stupid in this space.
Yeah, I hear you on that.
Yeah.
So how did you get involved with Bunq?
So I met the company's founder, which is Ali Nicknam. So there's a nonprofit in the Netherlands called TechLeap that does incredibly great work for scale ups and startups. Basically, they looked at the Dutch market and they said, we make a lot of startup companies, but we don't make a lot of breakthrough companies. How do we fix that problem? And it was a nonprofit that went after that. It's led by a guy named Constantine van Oranje. He is the one of the princes. I'm sure he'll love that I mentioned that. But it's more important that it's Constantine and that he works on these things. And he wanted to go after this problem for his country, so they're doing it. I got involved with them and we architected a program called Rise, which was about, because I had been an entrepreneur, I could speak from that point of view about what a program would be useful. Most of those things are crap. I really don't see much of it out there, that these kind of like bootstrap startup things, they don't really do much and they tend up like trying to charge you for rent. But this was about the hard problems that an entrepreneur faces. That's a setup for the fact that I'm on a stage one day and I'm doing a talk to startup companies and I'm sharing the stage with this guy who started, I hear he started a bank. I don't know what it is at this time. And I say something and he says something, and I say something, and we're kind of saying the same words, like, don't confuse your effort for accomplishment. That's just stupid, right? And I'm like, so we afterwards we kind of get some coffee and get to know each other, and we become friends. And Ali would later invite me onto the supervisory board. So I was on the board of directors for Bunq for a few years. And then at a time when some international expansion stuff was hitting some roadblocks. We talked about it, and I came into the company as a COO. Did that for a couple of years. Had to take a break from the company for personal reasons for our family, and then came back some months ago as what's known as the chief evangelist. And so I get to do spokesperson's work, but I'm also able to kind of move across the company on some of the hard problems and as a flexible executive in a way. And
And
just so that we get the Bunq story on there, like,
yeah.
people should check it out. It's not in the U.S. It's currently got a file. It's just filed for its biking license in the U.S. So an American will be like, "What is this company?" But this is a neobank. But it's one of the few companies in the world, and the reason I hang around it, that I've ever seen that is truly, truly obsessed with its customer. Meaning, no decision is made in this company that's not based on the customer's need or the customer's point of view. We don't even call them customers; they're users. So there's people that use our app, and it's a bank, but it's so much more in terms of how people can use it. And bottom line is the principles of defining your entire business around a single demographic that you're trying to serve, and to have a culture in the company where that decision cannot be made. Like, you and I can, I give this analogy. You and I are sitting at the headquarters in Amsterdam, we're eating a sandwich at the cafeteria. And you tell me, look, I was kind of watching the flow. If we move the chairs, that would be a lot faster, for people to get through the lunch line. We would have to do a proposal through data and prove that that would be better for our user. Otherwise, we're not going to invest in it because we got someone else we care more about than how this works. So that's how disciplined it is to serve a customer. And there's only a handful of companies I've ever known that are willing to go that far and hold on to their principles that much, which is really why I'm involved.
That's awesome, man. So are you Well, I think you're going to say both, but is that one of the big reasons, Bunq, one of the big reasons you're moving back to Amsterdam for your work with them, or?
It's not a requirement of the job. Like I can do what I
Yeah,
do from anywhere in the world. Like
yeah,
literally we serve our primary market is digital nomads. So I could digital nomad as much as I want and I'm just living the life, right? I think Amsterdam for us is it's a quality of life, it's cafe society, it's the type of way we like the European lifestyle for now.
Mhm.
But we only make 3-year plans. Like we don't make anything longer than that. We'll change our mind in 3 years and we'll do something else. There's a lot of world to see, man.
There, yeah, for sure.
This is just kind of a new base camp.
Cool, cool. So, okay, I I'd love to get into what the future looks like. I think a lot of the people tuning in, right?
Me too. Tell me. That'd be great. You can just tell me.
They're they're lifelong learners, right? Like they're people that constantly want to become the best version of themselves, and I think that that evolves in terms of you continue to raise the ceiling, right? You try to raise your standards consistently, and then
Yeah.
also there's like an evolution in thought in terms of how we think about success. So when you think about the next 3 years, or when you think about the future, or like who do you really want to become? What do you want to accomplish next?
Um, yeah, that's a good one. I mean, I kind of know the next few years. I think one thing is I know what I'm not. I know that I'm not a fade off into the sunset type of person. I'm not a like, you know, just kind of go find myself a boat and watch the sun go. I mean, I'm not that person. I'm irritated by things in the world that can be fixed, and I'm inspired by things in the world that can be achieved, and I have an energy for seeing change. I love disruptions. I love when an industry is sort of like ripe for something to just kind of fuck it up. And I love it when like the you somebody starts. I really liked like Uber and Airbnb and all that kind of stuff in the sense that they went into the market and suddenly everybody was going to sue them, right? And the beauty of that means you're doing something fundamentally different, or nobody would want to take away your right to do it. And I think those are signals. And I think there's still lots of that out there. So from a future perspective, for me at least, I think I got to find that this is a space like that. I think we make a mistake. We think banking is banking. Banking is technology and it's digitization and it's our money. And our money is one of the most intimate relationships we have on this planet outside of personal relationships. So that is a customer relationship that is so close and trustworthy. And if you could suddenly be able to do that anywhere in the world without all of the, hoopla of having to change institutions, that's actually something worth doing. And I find that a vision that I can get behind because it means something to me. I think there are things that are in the AI space. We haven't talked about AI. We're probably the only podcast in the last 1700 years that hasn't talked about AI in their first hour. But it is this wonderful frontier that is a lot like a kid, right? We don't know what it can do. It's so new. We need to not pretend that it's mature, but there's so much that we can do and there's so much testing. So for me, I want to play. I want to
Yeah.
play with this space. I don't want to try and start out with this perfect outcome and cash out exit vision. I want to play in this space with this technology and see what's possible. So there's a lot of curiosity pieces that I have to do in the next. I mean, I've always got 2 or 3 projects running, and at least 1 or 2 of them is touching on AI because I need to see how I can use it or how we can use it even before I want to go invent something really new and different with it. Because I think it's kind of like we discovered a new element, right, on the periodic table. And
Yeah.
before we decide that element's super valuable, we kind of understand what we're going to do with it.
So, as you
That's
put it, like not.
ambiguous. Sorry, that's a bit abstract, but
No, that's good. That's good. So, just to build on that, when you think about your own growth, right, professionally, personally, what's next for you there? How do you need to continue to evolve as a person, and how do
yeah,
you what are you working on, or what do you have to do to become like the next best version of yourself, right? To continue
next
to
best
improve.
Joe. Well, I could split that into 2 answers. One is I'll say professionally and personally. So professionally, I'm an operator. Like I can't exist without being in the machination of things. I know that some people feel like they graduate to strategy. I don't know what that means. I think that's people full of shit. I think people start to I want to work on the strategy and the board, and then they like I want to run shit. I want to see things happen. I want to see outcomes. I want to watch a customer get happy. That's so much better. And that's what real entrepreneurs do. They don't the other stuff is stuff they have to do to get it done. The day to day of like watching a feature go roll out is the thing that's like way cooler. So that's professionally. Is I got to stay in the machination of it all. Personally, I think I still have intellectual growth around how to make decisions, how to find that center that we talked about. I mean, it's a battle for me and always will be. My baseline is like run as fast as you can, and when you break your nose on the wall, the nose will fix itself, keep running. So I have to find that centerpiece that allows me to slow down enough to make better decisions and to be in the center of play, right? To be in that calm state of play where you actually elite perform rather than some other version of that. So there's still work to be done there. There's intellectual evolution of belief systems. There's intellectual evolution of understanding of principles, and I'm being abstract because I have an interest in mathematics, I have an interest in things that are scientific, and I just need to keep reading. I finished an old book. I reread this book every once in a while called Razor's Edge. I don't know if you're familiar with it. It's a book written by Somerset Maugham back in like the 1930s or 20s or something. And he has this character in it who basically went to war and came back disenchanted and decided to do a life of study and try to understand God. I'm not seeking to understand God, but I am seeking to understand the principles on the planet that we exist on and how they can affect our quality of life and the people that we love. And so there's things to be learned there. Sometimes it's a bit abstract, but I like the pursuit. So my evolution as a human will be a study of sort of high concepts that will help me gain insights into humanity, while at the same time, knee deep in the machinery of companies that I think are trying to do something important. That will bring me to advanced places where I think I'm more useful than I am today.
Do you feel like your definition of success has changed over the years?
Oh yeah. I think I once thought success had something to do with money. And and I don't and I think I learned that they're not connected at all. They're not. I know that you have an exit or something like that. That is a definition of success. And if you want to go do more things, people will look to that and see if that's like if you did that, maybe you can do it again. But I think success is more about your ability to do something that really interests you, that you don't want to go to sleep because it's so cool or so interesting to get into. And I think finding something like that is far more successful because I don't think that money is that complicated, honestly. I think that smart people figure out how to make money. And then the next thing you want to do is more difficult because it's not that anymore. So I think that success is about your ability to find what really powers your batteries and gives you purpose. There's a lot of philosophies across psychotherapy. One of the ones that I like is done by Viktor Frankl, so way back when.
Hmm.
And his whole angle is about purpose, right? So, a man with purpose is a person with ability and opportunity. And I find that to be a truism for me. You got to find that. And for me, if I'm helping my kids or if I'm helping entrepreneurs, I'm looking for like, what is that? What's that driving force? You got to have a reason to do it. And it could be as simple as like, I think it's unfair. Someone should do right in the world by this thing. Okay, we're going to make a better paperclip. That's enough. I don't need it to be, you know, saving everything. It can be that simple, but it needs to be clear.
So, one thing I would like to ask you about also is how your perspective on being a leader has evolved over the years. I mean, you've
Yeah.
been a leader in startup organizations, the largest of enterprises at Microsoft. You've been an investor in a board seat, so potentially at times in a leader capacity or mentorship capacity too, right?
Yeah.
Like, has there been an evolution of thought in how you think about leading?
Yeah, I mean, if you were to go back to early days, there's this like a psychological profile test that you can take. People, you've probably seen Myers-Briggs or DISC profile or things like that. And I took the DISC profile a long time ago. And it's like dominance, influence, something, something, attention to detail, I don't know, which I think is a statement in itself. Um, and I was like off the charts on the dominance and influence. So at the time, it was clear that my belief was that if I could push an organization hard enough, it would succeed. That was the subconscious version translation of that. Like energy, push, convincing, drive, that was going to get you there, right? That was a belief system I was operating within. I learned along the way through market dynamics, a series of failures, bad mistakes, lost money, successes, wins, exits. Through all of those things, I learned that actually that is not the most efficient use of my time and energy if I want to succeed. The most efficient time and use of my energy was my ability to empower other human beings to literally be great at something they're already good at. And this is to a level nuance, right? The first level is my job was to empower, like take off the restraints for other people. That's what my kind of multiplying, super effect could be, my multiple factor, my X factor. And then the second level was to focus on those individuals where they could be great at something and convince them not to try and be good at a bunch of things, but go be exceptional at this thing that they're really already good at. If you put those two together, then my leadership evolution came from drive everybody to a number over to choose really well people that can be exceptional and then remove the blockers, convincing them that they could be great at this one thing and get them to do it. So I'm hoping that is clear in the way that I've explained it.
It is, yeah. I did the disc assessment too. I don't know if they do they still do that?
I don't know.
Or I haven't done I did it like when I was starting out as an SDR about I guess 13, 14 years ago.
Yeah.
And I actually scored very similarly to you. I don't think
Yeah.
I never articulated or I never really processed it the way that you did or explained it about just like the pushing and influence in terms of
Yeah.
just like aggressive and
It's
just
sort of
kind of
like you're
environment.
convinced
Yeah.
in that profile, you're convinced
That
that
that's
your
yeah.
energy and drive will overcome any obstacle.
I think, and that's interesting too, because now I'm just thinking back in my career and I think it got me a long way, but it's like I've had
It,
to
it,
evolve beyond that. It's not enough.
Yeah. And the smarter people you work with, the less it works, right?
Yeah.
The more talented people you get to work with, the less your push makes sense. And the more your assistants help remove blockers, get them to focus, get them to zero in. It's like, in a way, I don't like sports analogies too much, but it's like you got some type of elite athlete, and if you can convince them that like they are the 3-point shooter, and then they just hit it 9 out of 10 times, like everybody wins, right?
Yeah.
But you have to get them to understand that. And
Yeah,
then
I think
that's not going to happen because you just made them do it, right? But you have this exceptional talent. So this is the ability to work through others is the evolution, right? In the beginning, most entrepreneurs I know can do most of the shit themselves, right? So eventually your ability to work through others, you either make or break that. A lot of guys, a lot of gals, a lot of people they can't cross that chasm. They get stuck on the other side of like, well, I'll just do it myself. They don't know how to systemically build a thing that can grow itself rather than to just kind of, you remove them and the whole machine breaks.
hmm,
For me, I want machines that exist without me.
I love it.
Yeah.
Well, Joe, look, we're coming up on time here, and I
Yeah,
wanted
man.
to say thank you for coming on today and sharing your life experiences and perspectives and philosophies and how those have evolved over the years across your successes and challenges. I had a lot of fun today.
I did too. I hope we didn't get too abstract. I know as we get into these, what do you want to do in the future stuff, it gets a little, it's hard to get a click down into like how people think, and that's your
Uh,
job in this interview. So I
I
do
don't
hope
think
it's
so.
useful to some people.
I don't think that like every podcast needs to be like give me 5 actionable steps to I mean it's there's enough of that kind of B2B content out there that gets like super tactical and frankly I think it's what I like about the new format we're doing. It's just I emphasis a lot more on the journey and I think people that are engaged they're people are smart enough to figure out how they can learn from others' life experiences. We don't always need it broken down into like
Yeah, and I think it's
shit,
like if you're willing, if you can get someone who will tell you the truth, right?
Right.
If I come on to this with you and I'm just telling you my sales pitch of how great I am and all these wonderful experiences and why I'm successful and blah blah blah, I used to think it's an empty suit. So in the end, if I can just tell you the reality of what happened, that's got to be more useful. I mean, look, if we don't need tactical actions, I mean, if anything, the podcast Smart List taught us that, right? Like those guys, that's just pure entertainment. But in a sense, there's also a lot of messages in there. But
Yeah.
all right, man, look, pleasure for me. Let's stay in touch, see where it goes.
Let's do it, man.